Mike Howell has dug in on this question. He's the director of the Oversight Project at the Heritage Foundation, and he joins us now. Mike, good to have you with us, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, so what is possible here? Can Democrats replace Joe? Can it be done?
Theoretically, yes, but with great difficulty, and it's not a slam dunk. And so it gets harder as time goes on, particularly post-convention. But to kind of break this down to the highest level, there's two separate issues right now. There is the convention where the delegates go and pick the party's nominee, but that does not necessarily mean ballot access for that person is guaranteed, because the patchwork of various state laws, rules, and procedures are all different, than others. Mm-hmm. Some states have very tight mechanisms that are laid out for why you could do a substitution or withdrawal. States have different timelines for that. They have different paperwork hurdles that need to be accomplished. And so the really short answer to your question is, it is extraordinarily complicated, and it's going to near guarantee extensive litigation, which we will lead should we take the position that an illegal substitution or withdrawal is going to occur. And then the end result of that could very well be Michelle Obama or Hillary Clinton have to run as a write-in candidate if that is who they replace Joe Biden with.
So on these ballots, I don't know if it's the same in every state, but the impression I'm getting is it's not just a placeholder for the party. It's literally the person's name is what is applied for and granted in order to appear on the ballot.
That's absolutely right. And different states have times where that needs to be met, when the ballots themselves are actually printed, and what you do if the change were to occur. And so in a lot of states, it'll end up being completely fine, particularly in states where, it's blue jurisdictions. They're going to do whatever it takes to switch them out if that does happen. So that's where we will step in and sue to make sure that if processes are being violated, they can't do it as a matter of election integrity. The rules need to be followed.
So in states where we now have endless elections, it used to be election day, but of course the left especially has stretched that into infinity. Does that create further complications for Joe Biden? In other words, Democrats have advocated to stretch the election into months-long affairs. Is that the kind of thing that makes it problematic for the Democrats to replace Joe?
Yes, absolutely. And there's an even more obvious reason why this is a thermonuclear, to be honest with you, situation for them. It's because the whole point of the long voting periods and the unaccountable mail-in ballots is to make it easier to cheat and have them filled out and collected, from locations.
Right.
Imagine if you're having to run a write-in candidate as opposed to just simply filling in the circle on the ballot. That the cheating machine is not well equipped to do that. It's a lot more difficult. So we got our eyes on that.
I'm just envisioning the obvious handwriting analysis that would go along with that. If it's the same exact handwriting thousands and thousands of times, it really kind of gives away the game, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And this is something I think Biden camp has been contemplating for a while as a defensive measure. The further it goes along and he survives here and then, pushes off the challenges, the harder it is for them to effectuate the replacement plan. And so what we have now is basically this cat and mouse game where Biden every day is more likely he stays on.
Now, are swing states in particular difficult to change the candidate in? So, because in some states they may say, well, we're not worried. We can do a write-in candidacy. The Democrat will still win there. Are some of the swing states the ones where there will be a real challenge?
Yeah, and we just put out a 50-state analysis that has it all there that you guys can go and look at Oversight in the letters PR on Twitter, Oversight PR. But in the memo we have, which goes over the massive kind of catalog of different laws, we identified Georgia, Nevada, and Wisconsin as having very specific procedures for the withdrawal of the nominee. Again, with different degrees of applicability and timelines. And then Wisconsin has a fairly tight rule set that doesn't really allow for withdrawal for any reasons besides death. And so some states you'll see things like they can withdraw if they're die or severely ill. Some states say, don't speak to the reason. And if you're a lawyer looking at this, what you see is a lot of ambiguity, a lot of timelines, a lot of steps that need to be met, which means a lot of litigation is going to happen if they try to pull this off.
On that issue, as in your review of all of these state laws, if a candidate dies ahead of an election, do they make it easy to replace them? Is that something where it can be done very quickly?
That is definitely the strongest reason to be able to have an easy substitution or withdrawal. That is one of the most common, that's the most obvious one, right? If the guy's dead, what do we do about it?
Right.
Where it gets more complicated is if it like is for a political reason or, you know, a reason of convenience or political preference. That's where it's not as clear cut.
Now, Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's running mate. So when you vote for one, you're voting for both. Does that give Kamala Harris any advantages here? In other words, if Joe Biden were to be yanked out of this race, does that make it easy for Kamala Harris to step up, or is it just as complicated for her to become the primary nominee?
Well, say in the events where you have on the ballots, it says Biden and Harris and then Harris for VP, but there's another writing candidate running as the DNC's nominee for president. Harris's votes would be, you know, largely unaffected because her name's on the ballot and the electors are for the vice president. Her map is more complicated, I think, than any other external candidate. I think the only foreseeable way this could happen is if Biden were to be convinced to step down. And in that event, it would not be, in my estimations, a continuation of their ticket with Kamala. It would be a new set of candidates all together to make this switch.
So they would still have to go through the ballot, an effort to change the ballot in all 50 states if Kamala Harris becomes the nominee in the months ahead.
Right. And if, you know, right now there's some states where this wouldn't be a problem. But there, as time goes on and the timelines are hit, it becomes increasingly more problematic.
Okay. No, go ahead. Finish that thought first.
I was going to say the faster they can do this, the less legal problems they'll have with ballot access. Every day that goes along, and particularly once you get past convention, the messier it gets. And so it's already a little messy now if they were to do this, but it's a guaranteed cluster if the switch were to happen, you know, in a month or two.
Right, and they've had some trouble. I think it was Ohio's ballot, right? Because Ohio's ballot deadline was going to occur before the Democrat convention, so the DNC had to make a decision that they're actually going to hold an official virtual proceeding prior to Ohio's deadline, which means that when they actually go to the physical convention, that they're just shooting blanks. That's just really a ceremonial event.
It was on Zoom, I believe, and you know, Governor DeWine appeared to have done, as a Republican, everything he could do to bend over to accommodate the Democrat Party there.
Yeah. Okay, so in your just now outside of the legal realm, just as a predictive matter, do you think this increases the likeliness that they are going to stick with Joe because everything you just described sounds very complicated and tough to get through?
Right, I do. I've long held that it doesn't much matter who is on their ticket, given the way that quote-unquote elections are run in the United States of America now, where it's a ballot collection exercise as opposed to a vote collection exercise. I think, while it's pretty obvious to the entire country, cross-party lines, how out of it President Biden is, people were aware of that when he was in his basement for the last campaign cycle. Mm-hmm. And so with our new constitutional complete shift that we've in the election system that we've undergone, where we don't really have a free and fair election. We have election month with just a ballot collection by machines contest. It doesn't matter if someone more popular than Biden's on the ballot because it's about the machine collecting the ballots. It doesn't matter about the ideas or the person anymore in the United States of America. And so why would you introduce this new problem of the ballot access issues? I think that's what Joe Biden camp's probably arguing, is if you sub me out, you're not going to get any more ballots than you would otherwise, and you might be able to get less because of this issue. And
they could always should they prevail in that ballot collection exercise, they could always sub him out after the election. That becomes far easier than dealing with all of those ballots. All right. Mike Howell from the Heritage Foundation, the Oversight Project there. Thank you for your expertise today on an emerging but important issue. Thank you, sir.